Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's Roundtable. We are the members of International Relations and Foreign Policy Cluster from Nickel and Dime, which is the official research and publication platform for Center for New Economic Studies. As panelists today, we have Nakul, Tanesh, Yashifardhan, and myself. And the roundtable is going to be moderated by Dhiman. I would therefore like to request Dhiman to begin with a brief introduction of what we shall be discussing in this episode of Roundtable.
All right. So, a famous author of the French literature once said that if France is without its pride, it's not France at all. So, today we are discussing about one of the most cornerstone of European security and of Europe itself, France. And as we have known recently, there has been riots in Paris, and the French president has given some very interesting statements regarding its independence from American influence. So, let's discuss about that, shall we? So, my first question to this esteemed column is that what do you feel about the position of France in the context of European security? Yes, Sarah, please.
So I would like to begin by acknowledging that France has long been recognized as a key player in the European security landscape. With its history of playing a leading role in the European military operations and its status as a nuclear power and permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. However, I would also like to point out on France's position on European security is not without its complexities and tensions. On one hand, France has been a strong advocate for more integrated and autonomous European defense policy, as seen in its support for initiatives like European Defense Fund and the European Defense Industrial Development Program. At the same time, France has also been known to pursue its own interest in matters of European security, sometimes to the detriment of the UE's broader goals. For example, uh, France has been critical of NATO's role in European security, arguing that alliance should focus more on threats in Europe's neighborhood, such as terrorism and instability in Middle East and Africa. France has also been skeptical of some UE initiatives that it sees as encroaching on its own sovereignty, such as establishment of European Army or European Intelligence Agency. Another factor that I think is important to consider here is France's position in relation to other UE member states. While France has often been at the forefront of efforts to strengthen European security cooperation, it has also been seen by some as by some is dominating the conversation and pushing its own agenda at the expense of other member states. So overall, I believe that France's position in European security landscape is complex and multifaceted, with both strengths and weaknesses. While France has been a key player in European security for many years, it must balance its own interests with those of the broader EU community and also work collaboratively with other member states to build a more effective and cohesive security framework for Europe.
Very interesting point, Sarah. Anybody wants to put press on Sarah's point?
Building upon what Sarah already said, France is, as we all know, is already the largest state in Western Europe. So it is without denial that we know that France has huge potential, especially when it comes to trade, security, and in terms of social and political development of the whole of Western Europe. It's also important to understand that France was one of the main initiator of the creation of European integration and behind the European Union. And it has been playing a key role in the integration of, and not just in the integration, but strengthening of the European Union as a whole since almost 60 years. Let's not forget that when the crisis in Ukraine was elevating and starting, it was France who first mediated and came forward and said that we should not Like as members of the European Union, we should not have differentiating or dividing opinions that could lead to a destruction of our unity. We need to stand together and form an informed opinion about the crisis, and basically just avoid and tackle the crisis as a union and in unity. So I think it's important to understand that it's always been a key initiator in strengthening the European Union and making it form as an unity.
Very interesting points, Nakul. Very interesting points. Anybody else interested in further increasing on these points? All right. So let us move to the next question we have here. Is what do you feel about the current French president's opinion on strategic independence from the rest of the NATO alliance? Like we see this coming push for doing our own thing in the world rather than being following America's footsteps. So what do you feel about that? Yes, Tarish, please.
I think that it does not reflect clearly what the views of other European states is. I think that France in itself might want more strategic autonomy, but other states in Europe, especially like smaller states, would want to be comfortable under the US security umbrella for now, at least.
Yes, very interesting point. And expanding on that further, actually, there was a statement by the Polish presidency that I feel it's very likely for it. They say that for the old Europe, this having America as a security is important, but for the new Europe, America is everything for us. Otherwise, you'll be swallowed by the growing imperialism tide in Russia or in some other country. Anybody else would like to expand on that? Okay, moving on. And as we know that France was a colonial power, it was second largest colonial power after Britain, and it had a lot of colonies in Africa as well. And now we see very interesting pattern here that France has helped in providing security to these colonies. So what do you feel about that? What is your opinion on this? Like we see there, yes, Sarah, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I believe the relations between France and its former colonies are complex and multifaceted, shaped by a range of historical, political, and economic factors. So while France has been proactive in defending its former colonies from various threats, it has also been criticized for its approach to post-colonial relations, particularly in relations to the issue of economic and political autonomy. Further, it'll be important for France to work collaboratively with its former colonies to build a more equitable and mutually beneficial relationship based on principles of respect and partnership. That's what I believe.
Yes, and that's very interesting point, Sarah, because what we see is that France has been extremely active in helping out African colonies, but it also has been responsible for extracting the natural resources of these countries to help. Now, expanding on now to address the elephant in the room, what is your opinion on the current protest? Would it be able to change Macron's policy, or do you feel that these protests will peter out after a while? So, what's your opinion on that?
I think it's pretty evident from the fact that the protests have been ongoing for a long period of time, and it has not deterred any constitutional action from the president or any members of the bureaucracy. They're still pretty keen on you know making the reform intact, which they already planned on doing so. And no one has crippled Macron's policy yet, because there has been no statement from him about what's going to be the future of this policy. The last I've heard is that they've appointed a constitutional committee to be set up, which will discuss the constitutionality and the legality of the reform. And as such, even after that, it's pretty evident that all the members of the bureaucracy do actually agree with Macron, as no one has been sided with the protest or with the people. So I think it's unlikely that the protests, which have been ongoing and the magnitude is also pretty high, will be able to afflict any change in the constitutional policies that Macron has designed.
A very interesting point here. Now, this is my personal question. This, like, I should add another question in this. Do you feel that the current war in Ukraine has affected the French economy as a whole and the French foreign policy? Because I believe this is a very groundbreaking moment for Europe. Because for 60 years you don't have a war, and suddenly you have a very large war. It's not a small skirmish. It's a full-on war with offensive, defensives. Yes, sir, Shorten.
Sorry, just to go back to the protest question for a bit. So like how the protest has panned out is like how like for the past 4 months it has been sort of brewing, and how the public's opinion has not been taken into consideration when these reforms were taking place. And just to speak, I think historically as to like how the popular mood can be affected by these like implementation of this reform. So back in 2010, when Sarkozy had implemented the raise the retirement age from 60 to 62, the studies had shown that like the mood within the French Republic was that of like polarization, where like people were moving towards the far left as well as the far right. And especially now with the emergence of the far right parties in France, I think we can sort of expect a certain dissatisfaction that can be expected in the coming future as well regarding this policy.
Yes, Sarah.
Yeah, adding on to Yashovardhan's point, I believe that President Macron has been a quite vocal advocate for greater strategic autonomy for Europe in recent years, particularly in the realm of defense and security. He also tends to argue that Europe needs to become more self reliant and less dependent on the United States for its security, particularly in the light of growing global challenges and the changing geopolitical landscape. However, one of Macron's key proposal is the creation of a European army, which would enable the EU to project military power and defend its interests more effectively. He's also called for increased cooperation and investment in European defense industries, as well as other closer coordination on, as well as a closer coordination on intelligence and cybersecurity system that's there. Uh, Overall, I believe that Macron's statements have been met with both support and skepticism from various quarters. Some see his proposals and approach as much needed step towards greater European unity and strength, particularly in the light of recent challenges such as Brexit and the rise of populist movements. Others, however, believe that question the feasibility and practicality of such initiatives, given the varying national interest and priorities of EU member states. Yeah.
All right, a very interesting point here. Now, let us now address one of the major partner of France, that is the United States of America. So what do you feel is the future of the French and American relationship? Because we see that France is now seeking a far more strategic independence. It's seeking its will to do its own thing and seeking a plan for entire Europe. So what do you feel would result in this current situation? Yes, Tanish.
I think the French, they base their foreign policy around wanting to be a greater power because if you look at European security, it is mostly dominated by America. And if you look at the European economy, it is also dominated by countries such as Germany. So France looks at itself as a country that is supposed to be a greater power, especially in the context of Europe's security and economy. So that I think would have made some troubles between the Americans and the French in regarding European security and economy.
Yes, and it's a very interesting point because this won't be the first time when Americans and the French are locking their horns, because when France moved forward to get its own nuclear arsenal in 1956, the Americans resisted it and they went against it. And I believe there was a famous statement by Charles de Gaulle that we will get the nuclear weapon even if we have to go out of NATO. And it happened for a short period of time. Yes, Sarah.
Yeah, adding on to that, I believe that the issues in US-French relations have arisen from a range of factors, including differences in national interest, strategic priorities, etc. One can be the economic and trade issues, Like the US and France have had disagreements over trade and economic issues such as tariffs and intellectual property rights. Another issue that I believe could be of differences in foreign policy priorities. Like, for example, the US and France have sometimes had divergent views on key foreign policy issues, such as the use of military force and engagement with international institutions and relation with countries such as Russia, Iran, etc. Another issue that comes to my mind while speaking is that of the cultural differences that is there. The US and France have different cultural traditions and political ideologies, which can sometimes lead to misunderstanding and tensions between the countries. Yeah.
All right, Sarah, very interesting points you have raised there. So therefore, I think anybody else would like to speak anything on this topic? Okay, then. All right, I feel that France has been an esteemed power in Europe for a very long period of time. I believe the French Empire, the first Napoleonic Empire, and all, and in the past. And I believe that France is looking back to its past, that past glory, and wants to relive that. But now we would have to, but now it would have to balance a new world where I believe it would face a lot of challenges. And I believe that we would see very interesting developments in Europe from the future. So that concludes our meeting on this topic. I hope to see you next time. Thank you.